Well, hearing no comments or questions or concerns from the last portion of the chapter on retribution, we'll go ahead and jump into the section called The Enemy, the Extraordinary. Um, and so Jesus is saying here um, that. Following on Matthew 5:43 and 48. You have heard that it is said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who abuse and persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Again, that's Matthew 5, verses 43 through 48. So, this is a tough part of the gospel. I think oftentimes many of us, or even over the history of the church, have kind of said, "Oh, well, yeah, that's great, Jesus. Sure, that's you're the Son of God. You've got all power. You know that God is on your side. You don't have to worry about things like we do. So that's great and wonderful for you to say, but." I don't think I'm going to follow that. Or we find ourselves in situations where we're directly challenged and we can't quite see our way through to acting in this way. Or even if we do, um, in some way we feel like we betrayed ourselves or those around us or our upbringing or many things because this is very different, very countercultural, even counterintuitive. But Bonhoeffer deals with that in his discussion of this portion. Um, and so I think actually now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't write my notes down, but we did kind of get to this briefly at the end last week. Now this word loves, this concept of love that has really informed everything to this point, now is explicit. Bonhoeffer is talking and Jesus is saying, um, where in the classic form here. You have heard it said, but I say to you. Again, this refining of the law, not abolishing the law or the old covenant, as sometimes has been taught over the history of the church, but in Bonhoeffer's view, and I think he's pretty spot on, is a recasting or a refining or a focusing of the law. And so, immediately, love is put into the clear-cut context of love for our enemies. Loving one's kindred is a commandment that could be misunderstood. Loving enemies makes unmistakably clear what Jesus intends. And so we know that even in the uh, Old Testament, in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Torah, Ten Commandments, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, body, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And as Jesus says, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So everything's based on love, even for the Jews in the Old Covenant, so called. Um, and we see even as Jesus is kind of discussing and debating with the religious leaders of his day, that even they had tried to figure out some ways around that that command to love God and love one another, principally in getting around showing love for even those that family and friends. You might recall, I think it's in Luke's gospel, um, where Jesus is upbraiding the Pharisees and said, you teach that if you uh, say that resources that are to be used in support of your parents are dedicated to God, or Corbin is the word that's used, then you don't have responsibility to take care of your family or of your parents, because the portion of your resources that would have gone to that is has been dedicated to God. So again, this kind of way to say, okay, I'm going to worship God, but in order to worship God, I'm going to not do right by you and or the people around you, which is Jesus is really coming to refocus that, loving God and loving your neighbor is they're equally important, and you can't do one without doing the other. And so in light of that, when Jesus comes to say, that you're to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you, that is it's very clear, and it's a departure, or seemingly so a departure from what has been said, because for the way that the Jewish nation lived out the law was, primarily focused on the Jewish nation. And even though, the Torah says that you're supposed to take care of the widow, the orphan, the stranger in your midst, that was kind of secondary. And now Jesus takes that and, kind of blows the doors off of it, or shows that God's intention in that love God and love your neighbor as yourself is really a radically kind of destabilizing and in many ways off-putting command to love everybody, um, given to love the people that and part of your family, part of your community, um, those that love you back. But no, my love is so broad that it includes even the enemy. Um, and so, and this would be understood very well, as Bonhoeffer goes and say, especially by the disciples, because they were considered enemies on so many levels, enemies of the Jewish state, of the religion as it had been practiced, enemies of the secular state, or of the political state and the Romans, because now they were these people that were espousing some other ruler aside from Caesar. They were, considered enemies, or had made enemies of their families, because they had said, okay, we're going to go follow Jesus, and that means that, you know, those, Peter, James, John, and Andrew, they left their nets, and left the family business, as it were, to go and follow Jesus. Matthew leaving the tax collector booth. These others that had different responsibilities now have said, "Oh, I'm going to go follow Jesus," and that will make enemies. That will make people upset. As soon as you make a commitment that takes you away from what the people around you expect of you, or at the very least that you now have something that is beyond your responsibility to them, beyond them, then that can make enemies. And so Bonhoeffer is saying that obviously the disciples would understand this. Obviously, the disciples would understand what an enemy was. Not just somebody that you're at odds with in the community, somebody you got an argument over something, or there's some other kind of squabble or quibble or tension between you two. But this is to people that don't mean you well. And these are people that can be in the community and outside the community. It doesn't really matter. These enemies that are against you are to be the object of your love. Um, and so flipping over to page 108, um, down at the end of the second to last paragraph on the page, or the first full paragraph on the page, um, Bonhoeffer says that God promised that we would gain victory over our enemies precisely by loving them. That doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't make any sense at all. Because enemies don't like you. So how are you going to get victory over them by loving them when they're going to reject your love, right? They don't like you. They want ill for you. They don't see anything good in you. They're so upset that now they hate you. So what is this? How is love gonna matter against that? But that's precisely what we see in Jesus. It's precisely what God intends to show us in Jesus, that love is the power, and really, frankly, the only power that will conquer evil, will conquer hate, will conquer our enemies once and for all. And loving one enemies is not only an unbearable offense to the natural person. It demands more than the strength a natural person can muster, and it offends the natural concept of good and evil. So, so it's clear, here that this is outside the norm. This isn't regular. This isn't normal. This doesn't make sense. At best, it's naive. At worst, it's foolhardy and dangerous. Why would disciples subscribe to this? Why would God advocate for this and command this? Well, it is precisely because, God, as he knows, understands how powerful love is. And the example that Jesus has shown, whether it's in the words that he spoke from the cross, whether it's in how he challenged, but still wanted the best for, his earthly enemies, that he wanted, the people even that killed him, that, sold him out, that trumped up the charges to get him assassinated, get him killed, murdered, executed. That even for them, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This gentle, unassuming, but intensely powerful love. That is the model of Jesus. That's the model of the cross. And so again, for Bonhoeffer here, if we're following Jesus and following him closely, then we'll realize that this is the way that we are asked to go. Um, the actions of the disciples should not be determined by the human actions they encounter, but by Jesus acting in them. So that's another connection to the fact that this is the kind of love that is beyond us. It's the only way that we can love this way is through the power of Christ. This isn't something that we muster up ourselves. We pray hard enough or study enough or worship enough, that somehow under our own power we're going to be able to love like this. This is supernatural love. It's not something that we can muster ourselves. And so because that is the case, then we are completely reliant on God. And we don't have to figure out what it's supposed to look like or how it's supposed to be or feel or what the response is going to be. We just are acting um, in imitation of Jesus. Um, and so, you know, the only source of the disciples' action is the will of Jesus. Um, so again, this is underscoring, that Jesus and following Jesus gives us the focus for our energy, for our activity, for our worship, for our dedication. And so, since the will of Jesus is the one that's compelling us, then again, we don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to figure out how we're gonna, muster up the strength. God will provide in those times when it's necessary. Um, Love must not ask if it is being returned. Instead, it seeks those who need it. So again, this kind of supernatural love is not concerned about the transaction of, well, I've done this for you, now you must do for me. not looking for, well, I can't believe that you've taken me for granted after all I've done. But this is the love that seeks out those who need it, not those who are going to reciprocate, not those who deserve it or have earned it, but those that need it. And Bonhoeffer goes on to say that that one of the ways that the disciples understand this is because they have been in the same position that the enemy has been vis-a-vis God. So the fact that Jesus's love, God's love, sought us out, as Paul says in Romans, when we were yet sinners, God found us and saw fit to die for us. And so so there's an understanding, at least in Bonhoeffer's mind, and that the disciple realizes that Jesus has done this already for them. That Jesus has loved them because they were enemies of the cross of Christ, enemies of this love that God has for us. And so Jesus reached out, saw about their needs, reached out to them. And since they have experienced this, then since the disciples experienced this at the hands of Jesus, and then they understand, and that creates in them a certain empathy and compassion for enemies when they crop up. That gives a certain sense of, okay, I understand what's happening here, even though the details might be different. But I understand, kind of that, that you're lashing out because you feel threatened by this love, and I know what that feels like because I did a similar thing, or I know what it feels like, and am willing to go uh, um, this far as to say I love you even though you're my enemy, um, because God did that for me. Christ did that for me, and it was so mind blowing, so overwhelming, so beautiful and glorious that I want you to have that too. And the way that I can help that to happen is by loving you. Um, and who needs love more than they who live in hate without any love? Who therefore is more worthy of love than my foe? Where is love praised more splendidly than amidst love's enemies? And so Bonhoeffer even goes on to say that the more animosity the enemy has, the more my love is required. And again, to remind us of the context, Bonhoeffer is seen in his society an evil that seems to be more powerful uh, than they have the resources, the energy, the ability to combat. They're not going to fight them. They don't have the political system is all given to to the Third Reich and Nazism. Um, Even the church has seemed to have succumbed. So what are you going to do? You're up against the state, the military that was, decimating its opponents in Europe. Um, what are you gonna do? How can you combat this kind of evil, this kind of power? Bonhoeffer is asking himself and those who are listening, and and he realizes, understands as he's working through some of this for himself, but obviously for the writing of the book and the students for whom he's writing it or presenting it, that the only thing that is powerful enough to overcome this kind of evil is love. And the more animosity, the more hate there's there, that requires all the more love. And again, doesn't make sense. Sounds very counterintuitive, foolhardy even. And yet, this is the example that God has sent us. This is the example that we follow in Jesus. Um, okay, so I'm going to pause there for a second, see if there are any questions or comments.
Bonhoeffer must have had some tumultuous challenge in his thought processes
Hmm.
because he's talking about this love. I don't know if the love has a name.
Hmm.
And it's a love that surpasses, as I said, surpasses all of our understanding. We
Hmm.
really don't understand it, but it comes from Jesus
Hmm.
or God.
Hmm.
And it seemed that he moved from being a pacifist in his thinking, then he becomes
Hmm.
an activist.
Hmm.
So he's talking about loving your enemy against everything, against all odds. So when at what point did he decide, well, love cannot conquer everything?
Hmm.
When he joined the underground to
Hmm.
to kill Hitler.
Hmm.
That's what I'm kind of baffling
Hmm. Yeah.
with.
Yeah. I mean,
He didn't have the numbers.
I'm sorry, Miss Curtis.
He did not have the numbers.
Mm,
Jesus had the numbers.
mm,
The fish and five loaves.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, I
That was his
think,
problem. He did not have the numbers.
and we'll get there in, in a few pages where, Bonhoeffer is saying that this is all going to come to a head. This is all there's
Mm,
going to
Mm-hmm.
be a huge battle that has already begun between good
mhm,
and evil, between darkness and light. And so some of what he's doing here is trying to get people prepared for that. And then, to Ms. Curtis' point about the numbers, he even says it might be small groups, but there will be groups of people in the society, within the church, that are going to stand against the darkness, and
Mm-hmm.
proclaim this prayer of love for enemy. And yes, and then, obviously something changed
That's right.
somewhere over the years where, where he's like, okay, something needs to be done. We can't wait any longer. He enjoys, like you said, from pacifist to activist to a plot
Mm-hmm.
to kill the Fuhrer. But again, that, we wouldn't really get to that discussion or reading any of that unless we get, into some of it. It's definitely his letters from prison, where he's asking some of the same questions of, this is what I thought. How did I get here? Especially, now his mortality
Mm-hmm.
is in his face. He's going to be executed. There's, you know, virtually no way he's going to get around that. So now he's like, well, okay, how did this happen? What am I to do now? And that's a whole other conversation, and maybe
Not
at
a
some point
total
in
Paul
time we might do.
regret.
But yeah, I'm sorry. Say again.
Not total Paul regret in his readings further on because I'm
Yeah,
reading real fast.
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. There's a but you also, what we're seeing is the very beginning of this really huge struggle of, how does the gospel speak to a situation that seems to be without any earthly solution.
That's right.
The church has capitulated, society has gone behind him. Uh, you know, Hitler has complete power. He's got, arguably the best army on the face of the planet. He's winning battles left and right. Powerful countries are falling. Now he's got the Axis powers where, Italy is in Southern Europe and in North Africa. Japan is, fighting, from their end of the Asian continent. So it's like he looks out, and the whole world is about to be overcome by this great darkness. So he's saying, well, what is, I believe the gospel. I believe that God is all powerful. So how is it that I can provide some guidance for people that I'm with? And, again, the folks that he's talking to directly are these students in his, underground seminary at Finkenwalde, and so he's really wrestling with, okay, what do we do? We have the gospel, we believe that God is all powerful, but we see evil winning all the time. What is there in the gospel that gives us some hope and some power that we might actually be able to see a change here? Um, and that's, those are desperate things. And so he's writing as if he's got it figured out, but he doesn't. you know he's writing as if, this is the answer that he is sure is gonna make a difference, but he's not really sure. He's still struggling. And then, as we know, over time, he's looking at what is happening and saying, okay, this is about to end badly. He is about to win everything. He is about to take over the whole world. How is this possible, God? And then, obviously he makes the decision to do something different. But again, when he's at the point of despair, he's really wondering, okay, where is the power in the gospel? Where are the indicators of what we are to do as believers in the face of such horrible evil? And so, he's worked all of this up, from the discussions of cheap grace versus costly grace, to now this long form discussion of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, working through each of these uh, each of these headings, each of these sections, directly to see, okay, what can I glean from this that will be of help to my students, of help to me, and then ultimately of help to society and the world. And so as he's poring over these scriptures that, he's read time and time again, this is what he's seeing, this is what he's feeling, this is what he's understanding. Um, and he didn't have it all figured out, but anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Now, I also wonder ultimately if he came to maybe not the realization, but in his own mind, that discipleship was achievable and quite costly. Was it or is it achievable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
In his other writings, I wonder if he, like when he walked to the gallows, I ponder what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
is discipleship achievable in this
Mm-hmm.
world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's
that's a
really
good
done.
point.
It's probably say what a waste
Mm. Yeah.
when he's walking
Could
to
be.
the gallows.
Mm.
Mm.
Right. Or, well, I just, Miss Caesar, I see you're unmuted. Did you have something you were sharing?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that according to Bonhoeffer's teachings, and I think philosophy of Martin Luther King about nonviolence, and Martin Luther King says that nonviolence it's about nonviolence and non-existence. I would
Hmm.
think what happened to Bonhoeffer in the beginning, he was for the non-violence and the pacifist, love, return the cheek for a cheek, an eye for an eye, that sort of thing. And eventually, when he decided to resist, when he did the resistance, that's when he got um, extinct. He ceased to exist because they
Mm-hmm.
took him to the gas chamber.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You can expand on that a little more, please.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure. Um,
And Martin Luther King studied Bonhoeffer.
mm-hmm.
He was he studied his works apparently.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
it. Briefly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because, likewise for King, there was a huge behemoth of evil that no one had been able to figure out. And so, okay, what do? You believe in the scriptures. Okay, where is it in the scriptures that gives you some some hope and some power against this, this huge, insurmountable foe. And so, but interestingly enough, two quick points. Interestingly enough, one of the reasons that King was assassinated was because he realized that nonviolence, not coupled with economics, was not going to
Work.
move the needle. Um, and actually, there is some evidence, might be tangential, might be maybe not strong evidence that he and interestingly enough, that he and Malcolm X were kind of moving toward one another. Because Malcolm's, militancy had kind of softened after having, after getting reprimanded by Elijah Muhammad, but then also after going on the Hajj and seeing the breadth of Islam. He was kind of, uh, you know, softening his edge, whereas edge was kind of hardening. And so there was, evidence that they were not that they had had discussions about this or anything, but that ideologically they might have been moving closer to one another, which was a threat, clearly, a larger threat than any of them, than either of them working, kind of seemingly, at odds with each other. Um, and so what you have is that the longer uh, a group or a leader or a group or a movement is up against this kind of power, there does become a question of, is this really going to work? Is nonviolent social change really going to work? And since we're here in this section, is loving your enemy really going to work? Um, and so there are those questions that arise, from our humanity, because we don't want to be doing this in vain, as Mr. Curtis was saying, we don't want it to be a waste. But how is it that we're going to see anything happen that looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel, that looks like somehow this evil can be overcome? Um, and so our humanity comes to play, and similar to the psalmist, my God, why have you forsaken me? Similar to Jesus on the cross. Where is the evidence of your power and your light, we ask, even as we're trying desperately to follow the example of Jesus, or to follow the example for the Jews of the law. Where is it that we're going to get some evidence that this is working, or some evidence that this is even possible to overcome it? And then, that's the struggle that, in some ways we all face, up against this, so I'm going to love my enemies, and that's going to do what? That's going to get my head beat in and get me laughed at and get, and mess up a lot of things. Loving my enemies, praying for them. Maybe we can pray for them, maybe, but loving them, like turning the other cheek, like what? This makes no sense, because then, I cease to be, or Miss Caesar, talking about, Bonhoeffer, you're out of the picture. Um, but even, and I'm gonna hush here in a minute. Even, we even see this, in terms of the martyrs of the early church. Uh, Rome wasn't going anywhere immediately. The Christian movement, wasn't that well established. Didn't have, friends in high places. Didn't have influence. And so, these Christians were being martyred, on a regular basis. Um, and maybe they said, or even those that were watching said, well, what good is this? This is such a waste. Just don't say anything. Just go underground. Just, say, Caesar's king, and, the son, or whatever. And just, so you can live on. You can still, be a Christian without, all of this. But then there is that evidence of the inspiration that those people were to people that were coming after them. That there was inspiration to people that maybe even their enemies, that when they saw them with joy and fearlessly going to be martyred, they, were like, oh, wait a minute, that's pretty remarkable. I wouldn't be that strong or that courageous or that joyful if I was going to my certain death. And then people began to ask us questions, and so on some level, not that we're going out there to be martyrs, but on some level, the desire to, or the attempt to love enemies, the attempt to follow Jesus as closely, does encourage others that, over time, maybe in subsequent generations, begins to have a profound effect
Let me ask
on
a
the evil
question,
that's around.
Father.
Uh-huh.
To tolerate with the likely of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can tolerate
Mm-hmm.
and accept to a point, and then maybe on the reverse level, you find out that that person is a loving person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then love come 1, 2, 3,
Mm-hmm.
not
Right.
1, 2, vice versa.
Mm. Yeah. 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 It's a tricky situation. Um,
Yes,
yeah. And then, also to your point, we're not guaranteed to see any any result. We're not guaranteed to see, the fact that, oh, well, this is having an effect, or the fact that, oh, this is a loving person, or we're not guaranteed to see any of that. If
no.
we do, thanks be to God, but that's not part of the calculus. At least it's not intended to be. We, really just loving. We're really just following Jesus, for the sake of following Jesus and for the sake of God's love. And that's the sole point and purpose. If we have a profound effect on somebody, okay, but again, that's not the point of purpose. If someone says to us, wow, you really inspired me, because I could never, have forgiven that person. I could never, continue to love that person. I could never, all of, whatever, fill in the blank there. And maybe we'll hear that, maybe, but that's not a guarantee. And so we're not doing any of this, Christian observance, study of scripture or worship service to one another, um, because we're guaranteed, a positive outcome, or that even a portion of it will be reciprocated. We're doing it, and again, this is, in line with what Bonhoeffer's saying. We're doing it for the sake of Jesus, for the sake of the cross. We're doing it because we love Jesus so much. We're committed so much to the work of the gospel that we're willing to undergo the persecution and shame. We're willing to undergo the threat to our existence. We're willing to be ridiculed and persecuted, because God's love for us is so much, that's our greatest desire. Um, and so, kind of coming back to the chapter and loving your enemies, it really, it's really, I mean, it becomes almost a superhuman. Well, I mean, again, it's not, excuse me, us doing it of our own strength or our own resilience or goodness, but it is God working through us. And so when we take hold of that, or trust that, or can live into it more often than not, then we realize that the negativity that comes back at us, from our enemies, really can't hurt us. Yes, it stings, it bothers us. We wish that people would be kinder. Sure, people will, say particular things, mistreat us. But ultimately, as Bonhoeffer says on 110, you know, um, we're saying to our enemies, be blessed by God. Your curse cannot harm us. But may your poverty be filled with the riches of God, by the blessing of God, against whom you rail in vain. We shall willingly bear your curse if only God's blessing comes to you. So there's a certain sense in following Jesus that we trust that God is all powerful and that we're operating, even though it doesn't look like it, we're operating from a power of strength and great power. Um, Now that's laughable on some level, whether it's the people around us laughing or even ourselves wondering, okay, what's going on? This doesn't make sense. This is silly. Um, but there's an assumption that we make as followers of Christ that God really is all powerful. Um, and even though we can't quite figure it out or might not see it in our lifetime or have sometimes have doubts that it's effective or can't see how this is helping a situation, we on some level by following Jesus are saying, I know that God's got it. I know that, God's plan, whatever it looks like, however it comes, whatever the timeline is, through whomever it comes, that plan is the only one. That's the one. Uh, God's will must be done. And so when we can trust that, then again, not that it doesn't make it easy, pardon me, it doesn't make it hurt less or scare us less, but it does help us to trust that that God really is in control, and that God is with us, and that, again, this kind of discipleship that Bonhoeffer is talking about um, doesn't guard us from injury, but it does focus us on the love of Christ. That as our soul, I'm going to use an analogy, and I hope it's not too crass, but the kind of devotion that this discipleship requires is the same kind of uh, singular focus that we might see in people that are addicts of whatever kind you want to talk about. That the object of their addiction so fills their mind and imagination that they'll do anything for it. Now, of course, in terms of addiction, we see negative outcomes. We see, um, you know, uh, vagrancy. We see theft. We see all manner of things to get the money in order to get the object of the addiction or whatever the case may be. But if you've ever talked to an addict or if you might be a recovering addict, you'll know that you wake up and that's the first thing you think about. Where am I going to get my next hit fix, whatever the case is? Um, and then that is the overarching goal, and everything else is driven by that. So then it's, where am I going to get the money and where I'm going to find, my dealer. And all of these things, you're consumed by this singular obsession with whatever the object of your addiction is. And that is really, so everything else recedes into the background. Everything else that you're doing, is focused on that. And so interactions with people are interactions that are focused on, okay, I'm going to talk to this person because I think this person can help me get whatever it is that I need. So that's a conversation that, again, while I'm having this conversation, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I get to the next step to getting whatever I need? And so that's really a similar mindset for for following Jesus. That each interaction, everything that we do from the moment we wake up till the time we go to bed is seen in light of following Jesus, of finding Jesus, of staying close to Jesus. So our interactions with one another, the prayer that we pray, how we do the work that we have to do in a given day is all filtered through or mediated through, as Bonhoeffer would say, through Jesus. So that when I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, okay, how is it that I can bring Jesus to this person? How is it? What does Jesus want me to do in this conversation? It could be a casual conversation, it could be an intense conversation, but that's what's in our brain. As you're plotting out our day. I have this X, Y, and Z to do, but all of those things are funneled in and focused through the person of Jesus Christ, of being close to Jesus, of following Jesus's instructions, of doing what Jesus did. And so when we're that, if we've ever been that focused on anything, and maybe not addiction, but maybe we've had a project that has really consumed us, so we need to get done for work or for church or for some other civic responsibility, or we're caring for someone, and the care for that person just completely engulfs us. And so we wake up and we're like, okay, I have all of these things to do, but my main goal is to care for my loved one or my patient, or whatever the case is. So everything is oriented around that. The conversations with whoever, the person in the grocery store, the bus driver, the cab driver, our employer, our family member, our whatever, is all rotates and revolves around the care that we need to give to the person that is in our care. And so it's that kind of and then when you're that focused, some of the things that would normally really hurt you to the extent that you have to immediately react, or would throw you off your game, don't, because your focus is on getting through all of this, so that the care of the loved one, so that the object of the addiction, so that the love of Christ is real, and is the foremost in your mind. And so if we can kind of you know get our heads around that, if we can refer to a time where we've been that focused, or the case, in then it kind of becomes okay. This still is not easy, as if being that singularly focused it ever is. But I can kind of begin to see why, or how it is that discipleship is to take place. I can kind of, maybe not get comfortable with, but have a clear understanding of how important it is to be this focused, and how I can be this focused, and things like loving your neighbor as yourself, loving things like blessed are the poor, you know these things that the Sermon on the Mount talks about. That as we sit here and kind of talk about, I was like, this is impossible. There's just no way at all that this is achievable. But when we think that of how we can be focused on something so much that other things that normally are a really big deal kind of fade into the background, then we kind of get an inkling of, okay, this is how discipleship is to work. This is how following Jesus is to be. The sole primary focus of my existence. And then when that's the case, then we might be able to get our heads and our hearts around, what Bonhoeffer is saying, but what really is required of us to follow Jesus. Again, not easy, not simple, not smooth, but because we're so intent on the goal of caring for the loved one, the goal of getting whatever the object is, the goal of following Jesus, that the things that are around us all serve us in that singular headlong pursuit. Okay. Okay, so we have 2 minutes to Compline. So thank you all for your thoughts and your participation. Um, next week we will finish up this section because it's really important. Well, we'll talk about it. We'll finish up this section next week, and then we'll be off for I guess for Wednesdays. But we'll talk a little bit about what folks might do in the interim. But thank you. I know that Compline will begin now in probably about a minute and a half. So thank you for those who are here for our book discussion of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Welcome to those who are here for our service of Compline and night prayer. And so we look forward to however God manifests in our lives together and as individuals in the days to come. Thank you all, and Compline will begin in about a minute.
Thank you.